1972 Hardie-Ferodo 500 wasn't just another Bathurst. It was a line in the sand for Australian touring cars. Political pressure boiling over into the Supercar Scare, a soaked mountain that punished the heavy hitters, and a 27-year-old Peter Brock driving solo, sculpting the first chapter of a legend. By the time the checkered flag dropped after 130 laps, the narrative of who could conquer Mount Panorama had shifted forever. This is how it happened, and why it still matters. A slate grey sky hangs low over Mount Panorama, the wind needling across the grid. Mechanics tug at tyre warmers, pit crews check fuel rigs, and camera lenses fog with drizzle. Big Falcons, blue oval bruisers, loom on the front rows, their 351s rumbling like distant thunder. Holden's LJ Torana XU-1s look almost modest by comparison, lighter, shorter, and on a day like this, more agile. The Chrysler Chargers, the muscular E49s, sit poised to strike. From pole, Ford's factory ace Alan Moffat has the measure of the field in qualifying, punching out a 2-minute 35.8 lap. Pole and a new statement of intent at a mighty average clip for a wet-threatened weekend. It will also clock the fastest lap in the race at 2:36.5. Pure pace, never in doubt. But pace is the only one of the three currencies at Bathurst. The other two are patience and pitcraft, and they will end up deciding everything. And standing fifth on the grid, in a 6-cylinder Holden dealer team Torana, is Peter Jeffrey Brock. He is about to drive the entire race on his own, no co-driver, something regulations still allow for in 1972, and which both he and Moffat elect to do. It will be the last Bathurst run under the rules that make such Ironman stints feasible. From 1973, the race grows up, becomes a 1,000 kilometre race, and modernised Group C machinery takes over. But that is tomorrow's world. Today, the mountain belongs to the brave, the nimble, and the wet weather wise. To understand the tension in 1972, you have to rewind a few months to the winter headlines that detonated across Australia. Motoring editor and racer Evan Green warned of the 160 mph supercars soon, citing road registrable Bathurst specials and quoting New South Wales Transport Minister Milton Morris, who was appalled at bullets on wheels being sold to the public. Within days, the political heat was fierce enough that the governing body announced the death of the old series production formula for 1973, and the manufacturers began pulling the pin on their wildest homologation plans. Ford's Phase 4 Falcon, Holden's V8-powered LJ Torana, and Chrysler's uprated Charger variants. The era that had escalated showroom stock cars into Mount Panorama weapons was being shut down in real time. The 1972 Bathurst 500 thus becomes the last of its kind, a grand finale for the Buy It on Monday wars. The field we see lined up is a product of that turmoil. Phase 3 Falcons, the final form of Ford's Street Bruiser, facing off against the clever, light, 6-cylinder XU-1 Toranas that Holden knew could dance when the heavy hitters had to wrestle. It is the most political Bathurst grid of the era, and the rain only sharpens the plot. When the flag drops, Ford torque bites, and the Falcon Phase 3 thunders away. For the first laps, the fight is precisely the one everyone came to see. Moffat's factory Falcon versus Brock's dealer team Torana. On a dry day, the Falcon's straight-line muscle and long-legged gearing are overwhelming weapons. But by lap 1 on a rain-threatened Bathurst, the script is already smudging. The circuit alternates between greasy damp and truly wet corners, darkening with standing water and slick rubber. The mountain, as it always does, starts taking names. In the early going, calamity strikes several fancied cars. Colin Bond, the 1969 winner and Brock's dealer team stablemate, rolls his Torana on lap 3 while running strongly. Fred Gibson's Works Falcon ends up on its lid at McPhillamy Park after being forced offline lapping a back marker in treacherous conditions. It is the kind of day when the brave can look foolish and the cautious can look like savants. Up front, Moffat and Brock fence. The Falcon is savage on Conrod. The Torana is tidier across the top. Then the circuit gets properly wet over the mountain and the balance tips. Moffat spins at Sulman Park, one of those vortex moments when the entire race picture turns in a single rotation of a steering wheel. He gathers it up and charges on. This is Alan Moffat after all. But the day has flashed a message. Blunt force horsepower is no trump card on a wet Bathurst. If you're mapping the wettest epics in Bathurst history, 1972 is right up there. The track cycles from shower to greasy sheen, catching out any driver not reading the surface corner by corner. In this environment, the Torana XU-1 comes alive. It is a lighter car with less weight to haul down from skyline and puts its power to the ground more progressively. In the Falcons, big block torque wants to break the rear loose. In the Torana, Brock can roll speed and preserve tyres. That combination, patience, mechanical sympathy, and a car that loves damp tarmac, is kryptonite to the big Fords. Brock is not just quick, he is unruffled. For hour after hour he drives as though the throttle is connected to a spirit level. Where others saw puddles and peril, he saw reference points in rhythm: curb, crest, camber, repeat. Bathurst has always been one in the lane as much as on the track, and 1972 proves it brutally. Under the ARDC's regulations, engines must be shut off during refueling. Only once fuel is done can the motor be restarted. Jump the gun and the clock will bite you. Brock's final stop is clinical, well, almost. In that kind of moment that can turn a team's manager's hair grey, the number 28 Torana fires before the fuel rig is withdrawn. It's a rules breach. Race control hands down a 1-minute penalty. In a 6-hour contest, that sounds small, but it's not. It's a lap lost if your pace softens, a hammer blow if the rain worsens. But Bathurst is fair in its cruelty. Twice the same refueling restart infraction snares Moffat and the Works Falcon. 2 separate 1-minute penalties go on the board for car number 1. Add in the earlier spin and the rising tyre and brake stress of hauling a phase 3 through intermittent rain, and those 120 seconds become a mountain the Falcon cannot climb. On a day when 351 cubic inches should have been decisive down the straights, the stopwatch and the rulebook hit back. Elsewhere in the lane, attrition is the uncredited co-star. Brake fade, flat-spotted rubber, and small errors multiply into terminal ones. The Chargers with their mighty Hemi 6s are rapid but inconsistent. The rain neutralises their straight line advantage and they spend much of the day in the same limbo as the Falcons, always looming, rarely landing the blow. Doug Shivers, a master craftsman, nurses his E49 into contention not with fireworks but with nous. By the last hour, he is every bit a podium threat. By mid-race, a shape emerges. Brock's Torana is not the fastest car on a clear lap. That is Moffat's Falcon, which sets the outright fastest lap of the race. But it is the fastest car over the ground where you factor traffic, surface and consistency. The Torana stops cleanly, runs light and never abuses its consumables. The Falcon is a masterpiece with a caveat. It wants a dry Bathurst and the kind of clear air you get in dream stints, not in the gritty, soggy theatre of October 1972. John French, the Queenslander in the Brian Burt Ford entry, becomes the quiet stalker. When the factory Ford blinks, French keeps his head. If Moffat was wrestling a rhino, French was guiding a Shire horse, still heavy but measured. The timesheets tell us that Brock will finish a lap ahead of French and the Phase 3, with Doug Shivers a further lap down in the E49 Charger. In a way, that order is the day summarised: nimble control, then tidy stewardship, then raw pace tempered by circumstance. Behind them, an Australian touring car aristocracy picks its way through disasters. Leo Gagan hustles a Charger to fourth despite his own penalty woes. Don Holland and Bob Forbes bring home class honours for Torana runners further down the order. And critically for historians among us, 1972 marks the single time that the big three of the era all stand together on the outright podium: Holden, Ford and Chrysler. That image is a postcard from a time that would never be repeated. So what makes a great wet weather drive? Not heroics as such, but friction management, knowing when the surface breaks grip and where it gives it back. Brock's 1972 stint is a dissertation in exactly that. Listen to the way contemporaries talk about it in later years. No waste, no showboating, just a composed, ceaseless extraction of the Torana's advantages. The XU1's nose points easily, it brakes last, its rear puts down power without tantrum. Bathurst's cambered, crowned and concrete patched corners, treacherous in drizzle, become allies to a car and driver who don't have to bully them. But here's the part that often forgotten in the mythology. Brock had to win despite a 1-minute penalty on his ledger. That meant no late freebies, no padding. Every lap in the last hour needed to keep French at arm's length in real terms and on corrected time. And remember, this is a solo run. no rest, no reset, just over 6 hours of work in a cockpit where noise and humidity make thinking a conscious effort. Brock's eventual race time of 6 hours and 1 minute, including the penalty, says something about the pace and about discipline. An average speed of roughly 133 km an hour in those conditions says the rest. When the checkered flag waves, the scoreboard is coolly definitive. Brock, 130 laps, French, 129, Shivers 128, Gagan 127. Moffat, despite raw speed, sits back in ninth on 122 laps. A day of brilliance curdled by penalties and that costly Solomon spin. Bathurst is once again reminded that fast is only one ingredient. The number 28C dealer team Torana XU-1 becomes instantly iconic. A nimble six that bloodied the nose of Ford's biggest factory effort in the wet. Supercar's own retrospectives are ambiguous. Brock and the nimble XU-1 defeated Alan Moffat and the might of Ford's factory in the rain-hit 1972 race, a year when both men drove the 500-mile contest solo. In a country where the pub debate had been dominated by absolutism of cubic inches, the little Holden proved that weight, balance, and the right hands mattered more when clouds gathered over Bathurst. For Brock personally, it is a coronation. He had debuted at Bathurst in a big-hearted Monaro. He will go on to become the king of the mountain with 9 wins in total. But the first one is a signature flourish, solo, wet, and achieved in the last ever 500-mile Bathurst, run under the soon-to-be-retired series production rules. From 1973, cars are allowed more explicit racing modifications under the new Group C, and the race lengthens to 1,000 kilometres. The epoch shifts, and Brock is already at the forefront. Bathurst 72 didn't simply happen in a vacuum of lap times and pit calls. The Supercar Scare had changed the stakes. Evan Green's front page story and Milton Morris's Bullet on Wheels line had painted a vivid picture to the public, road registrable missiles built to satisfy racing paperwork. The backlash had real teeth. Within a week of the headlines, Ford, Holden and Chrysler all either pursued or abandoned their most aggressive homologation projects. Cams responded to the same heat, flagged the end of series production as the Bathurst benchmark. The 1972 grid therefore becomes a time capsule. Falcons at their Phase 3 peak, Toranas in XU-1 trim, and Chargers as E49 muscle. One last, decisive instalment before the rules and politics move the goalposts. And the irony? The public crusade that feared 160 mph supercars helped deliver a Bathurst where the smaller engined car, driven with restraint and skill, outlasted the giants. If there was a lesson in that to mollify the headlines, it was this: speed without control is a waste. The 1972 result preached it in capital letters. But why does Brock's first Bathurst win endure? It wasn't that he just won, it was the way he won. He did it solo, in a car that, on paper, was undergunned next to the Phase 3 warhorses. He did it in the wet, reading the mountain with the poise of a veteran. He did it despite a 1-minute penalty, which meant there was no coasting. His margin had to be made and remade in real time. He did it at the crescendo of a political storm that was about to change the rules entirely. A decade later, when people argued about the greatest Brock moments, 78 to 84 would come up, untouchable peaks. But if you're asking where the crown was first placed, it was right here, in the rain of 72, when he proved that racecraft, mechanical sympathy, and the right car for the day trump pure muscle. For the event 1972 is the hinge between eras. The last 500-mile race, the last year the rule set essentially assumes what you can buy is what you race. From 1973, Bathurst becomes a 1,000k race, Group C arrives, and the cars evolve into bespoke racing tools wearing showroom clothes. You can draw a straight line from the Supercar Scare to the technical identity of Australian touring car racing over the next decades. For the manufacturers, Holden learned something deep. Give a great driver a light balanced car and he will defeat a sledgehammer when the weather wanders. Ford learned that speed alone cannot cover procedural mistakes in pit lanes or the realities of a wet mount panorama. Chrysler learned that raw engine brilliance wasn't a silver bullet without a car that could carry it across 6 hours of changing grip. The podiums, Holden, Ford, Chrysler, parity, was both a celebration and a farewell. For the drivers, Brock's 9 wins begins here. Moffat, undiminished, will write his own towering Bathurst chapters. Chivers's reputation as craftsman grows. Bond and Gibson remind everyone that Bathurst is never truly impressed by past glory. If you scripted a perfect Bathurst to test a philosophy of racing, 1972 would be it. The political controversy of the Supercar Scare framed what was at stake. The weather forced drivers to reimagine the balance of power. The rulebook, particularly pit lane protocol, turned seconds into verdicts. In that crucible, a relatively small, well-sorted Torana, driven by a young man with a feel for weight transfer and wet tarmac, beat the biggest spend in the paddock. The story is not anti-Ford or pro-Holden, it's pro-Bathurst. The mountain will always ask the hardest question for the day at hand. In 1972, Peter Brock had the answer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Racing Chronicles. We've got plenty more stories coming your way, so stay tuned for the next chapter in racing history. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.